I'm Pastor Lisa, and it is my deep joy to welcome you here tonight on behalf of our Governing Board Task Force. And as you are seated around the tables, you probably will want to turn your chairs a little bit so that you can see the PowerPoint presentation, because we're going to have some slides and some images that help to explain a little bit more about this exciting new structure. I'd like to start out tonight by giving thanks to the Governing Board Task Force. We had a great group who was working on this together and will continue through the process. And that was Pastor Terry and myself, Catherine Elliott, Fran Klinger, Tom Bunger, Jessica Merkel, E.G. White, and Nick Smith. So huge thanks to the team. Raise your hand if you're part of that team. All right, thank you. So if you have questions along the way, they will be part of the listening session, and happy also to answer those questions. I'd like for us tonight to open up together with a word of prayer. And so let's share in these words together. Come, living God, and grow our faith. Come and strengthen our hope and deepen our love. Through the power of your loving Spirit, come and water within us the desire to be holy, as your Son Jesus is holy. Amen. I am very excited about sharing with you tonight this new proposed structure for us. I think it will help us to be more nimble and more flexible, more accountable in our decision making, have greater alignment with our mission and vision, and engage people in meaning rather than meetings. And find ways for us to live out the ministries we believe that God has called us to here at First Methodist and well beyond our walls in Bloomington and beyond. As we get started tonight, I want to take a moment to remind you of our mission and our vision. And we are going to say those together, and our mission is actually the same as for all United Methodist churches. Let's say it. Our mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And specifically at First Methodist, this is our vision. Our vision is to change the world through a Christ-centered church that is open to all, a safe place to grow, and a servant community. As we start to explore this structure together, I want to invite up front Tom Bunger, who is our acting church council chair, who's going to explain to us some of the whys behind this new structure. Tom. You can put it towards the computer.
All right. First of all, thank you all for coming out this evening. As I was preparing to share to the whys, as I've been in leadership for a while here, and I actually pulled out a different leadership structure that I was handed the first time I took a responsibility, and it was actually from Ross Marks. Those who know Ross's signature, that's Tom B, and he's written it out there. At that time, the Charge Conference was a far different event than what it is today. But we had an administrative board. We didn't have a church council. We had a council on ministries. Anybody in the room remember council on ministries? Okay. I thought there might be somebody here. So Mary Jane has seen that. And at that point in time, the administration and the church activities were separate. They did not meet together. And then we had the church council, which was the next brand or the next leadership structure that we used. And even within that framework, when Phil Amerson was here, he actually formed what he referred to as the kitchen cabinet, and that was the leader of various sections, which to a certain extent looks like what we're talking about going to. The difference is the manner in which we're approaching this, but more importantly, the manner in which this new leadership structure will work, because it will be all of us involved in what happens. So the first point is higher accountability. While we may be paring down the numbers, the meetings will be the same as you have always seen. This board would meet, you all can be present in that room, the board will be making decisions, you will be a part of what happens. The board will assume a lot of the responsibilities that flow from other groups, and the only time the board would act without us being present and participating would be if they were acting as the staff parish, because personnel matters are personnel matters. But in order to reach our mission and align with our vision, we think we need a higher system of accountability. And I'm going to lead through what the structure is, but Jessica is going to come up and talk about the accountability factor and how all this will work. But it will tie in together with the leadership, pastors, and staff. It will be streamlined. Our current structure of church council, we now notify 91 people when we have a church council meeting. Now, a lot of you have been here, and you know we don't have 91 people who attend, but there are 91 people who are notified. We also have a lot of red tape, and I've been around all the things when people have wanted to present things, and this will establish a process, a way to get things done and to move things quicker. It will allow us to focus on our vision. Part of this is a governance board, and I'll get and show you the drawing, and I'm not sure if it's on what you, is the new, it's coming up, I know, on my PowerPoint, but that, okay, you've got that, and what that does, there's a vision team. So we've got people, and we like to say they look 1 year, they look 5 years, they look 25 years. They're coming up with where we are going as a church. And that's going to be different from the governance board. So we're looking for dreamers in that capacity. And they will then come up with the vision, values, and core strategies, and the board itself will then, the governance board will take that information. Time, ministry versus meetings. Yeah, we're here in a meeting. There were a lot of you that were here in a meeting on Saturday. And there were a lot of people after the meeting on Saturday was done, stayed for a church council meeting, so we had a meeting after the meeting. So there'll be more purpose in what we're doing. It'll give us an ability to look at what we're doing, why we're here, what we call an outward look. What would be missing from Bloomington if our church wasn't here? When you look at the vision committee, when you look at how we're going to structure this, it will let us focus on the mission and ministry beyond our walls, but more importantly, what it's going to give us is an ability to understand what we're doing. Now, here's what I was talking about. You've got this, so don't worry about trying to read what's on this. If you'll look at the proposed new structure, you can see. Now, what you don't have the benefit of is the colors on that, I don't think. You got the colors, okay, well, very good. So if you can see, if you can look at the group, it's intentional with how this works. So I'm going to move on. If you keep that in front of you, how's it work? Higher accountability for pastors and leaders. The governing board is made up of 9 to 12 spiritual leaders selected for their gifts, skills, and Christian character. All will have faith in their worship attendance, faithful worship attendance, shall we say. Hopefully they've got faith when they're there. Small group participation, giving and service. They may be visionary leaders, organizers, content thinkers, or process-oriented managers. Now, we all talk together to come up with this. It's hard to imagine that me, of all people, would use a sports analogy to look at this. But the governing board, if you want to look at it, and you look at the chart, the governing board, in essence, is the commissioner. They're the umpire, they're the scorekeeper, they're the cheerleader. They're all that capacity. They define the goals, which means they're with us. They're in meetings where you will be able to participate, but they'll define the goals and the boundaries. They'll provide accountability. They'll provide support for the lead pastor, who is, in essence, the coach who guides and empowers the members in ministry. We'll vote on the guiding principles for the lead pastor to interpret to the pastoral staff, ministry leaders. It will funnel its way down that chart. The lead pastor will hold the pastoral staff, ministry leaders accountable, and the board will hold the lead pastor accountable for their interpretation and the application. Otherwise, we have a direction. We filter that direction down through the various folks on that chart, and then everybody has somebody who's looking after to make sure that we are following our direction. On the new board, there will be a chair of finance, stewardship, staff parish, and trustees. So that those entities will be represented on the board. When the governing board is making a decision related to staff parish, that would be the time, because it's personnel, we wouldn't meet in a public setting like this. The board may choose to create different task force or ad hoc teams to carry out things that are going on. So if there's a capital campaign, maybe there'll be a group needed for that and formed. The governing board will set that out, a task force to work on that and report on it. The initial governing board, and I'm not sure if have I got more points that are coming down here? Yeah. The initial governing board will be based on their gifts and accountability. So they'll be picked by the current nominations committee in consultation with the senior pastor, and they will be appointed hopefully by charge conference this fall. They will serve a 3-year term. That's 9 to 12 people. So when the initial board is created, there will be people with a 3-year term, people with a 2-year term, and people with a 1-year term. So it will always be a rotating group. So it won't be the same 10 people moving forward. Those people will move on and off. But again, the point I want to make clear about that is this board will be, and the governing board initially would meet monthly to get started, but our goal is to have it meet perhaps 6 to 9 times a year, but the board will determine that, and I would suggest to you circumstance will determine that. Now we've got the governing board, but I talked about the vision team. The vision team is 6 to 8 people with diverse background. We don't need that one for that. Diverse background and who have spiritual gifts and selected by the pastor. And they have prayer, and they will be picked by prayerful discernment of where God is leading us. All will be, again, faithful in their worship attendance. So they will be participating in some small group within the congregation, giving and service. They'll also serve in a rotating class that will be replaced by the governing board as nominations. So 6 to 8 people, again, the same people rotating on and off. The vision team's charge is to discern the work of God in our congregation and the community. They will set long-range planning goals, which they will convey to the governing board for their congregation to achieve. They will answer questions like, where are we going? How are we functioning? What can we do better? What can we do better? How are we living our mission? They'll look at the larger picture. They might not be worrying about what's going to happen. They're not going to be worried about what's happening next month. They're going to be dealing with what's going to be happening the next year, the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. They'll look at the larger picture and deal with that. They will hold the governing board and in turn the pastor accountable to their goals. So they're going to come up with a charge, and they're going to be making sure that the governing board is following through with it. They will meet almost monthly with the lead pastor. Who are the key players? I'm going to step away and I'm going to speak loud. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah. Hear me over there?
Yeah.
Okay. When you look at the key players, responsibility and accountability and authority. And really...
Can I give you this? Because there's people on live stream.
On live stream, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. If you look... Are we on?
You're on. Go. Okay.
Okay?
No.
Did you just switch it off?
I
It
don't
was
know.
on.
I know. It's on. It says it, but the light's on.
Oh, that's not good. Let me get you the battery.
Okay. You want me to wait?
I think there's some right here.
Okay.
Probably did it on Saturday.
Now it's on.
Now it's on. I can hear it. There we go. Okay.
Okay. What I want you to do is to look at this order and the positions. There's reason to the manner in which this goes. The first group that's looking out, that's helping us plan to see where we're going, that's the visioning team. Those are the dreamers. Those are the 6 to 8 people that are looking at where are we going, what do we need to be doing, and determining that. They are taking that vision to the governance board. The governance board are the people that carry out to see that we're about that mission, and they are the people that will be providing accountability and support. The governance board then passes on to leadership, the pastors, what's the expectation. So far different, and I have to appreciate the fact that we have a senior pastor who's looking at us and saying, I'm in a position to have somebody hold me accountable. I'm in a position for us to say what we're about and somebody to say, well, you're doing it or you're not. That's somebody who's willing to be a leader and assume that role. And Lisa, for that, we give you thanks. Management. It works down to management, the staff and lay leadership. They're the ones that equip us and coordinate in what we're trying to do. And then you get down to the ministry. All this flows to what you, me, everybody out there will be doing. Memberships and congregants, outreach first, and then care for each other. Those are the people that are parts of what's to happen in the process. Look to see if I've got where I am. I think we're to Jessica to go exactly so you can understand how that part's going to work. And then when we're done, we'll stand up and we'll be here for questions about what we've shared.
So this structure that we just kind of sped through is based off of the concept that we have built-in accountability. And without accountability, or this accountability leadership structure, we will be operating like the dodo bird race in Alice Through the Looking Glass. If anyone ever read that or is familiar with it, dodo bird race, dodo birds are running around, there's no rules, people come in, come off, they run parts of it, they leave, they run in different directions, and without rules or boundaries or accountability, no one knows who wins and who loses. So this accountability leadership structure lays out the expectations of the governing board, the vision team, and their respective members. It gives guardrails, but not handcuffs. Without accountability, we cannot be measurable. Accountability is what connects achievement and reward. Accountability plus responsibility and autonomy is what gives us that. Otherwise, we're a bunch of do-gooders who do no good. So, the guiding principles, which I believe you have? Yes, sorry. They're written like lawyers, sorry. But they're there because they create the overall rules that set these boundaries. It's like pulling up the bumpers when we go bowling, right? We want everyone to stay around here. So these set the boundaries for the board, for the pastor, for the staff, and the lay leaders. When you're sleepy, please read them. They will help you go to sleep. But they're important. I don't mean to denigrate them. They're very important because they set those rules for accountability. We also have the mission principles, and they define what difference the First United Methodist Church will make for whom and to what extent. It explains what is to be done. And the boundary principles define the limits of acceptable means that the lead pastor is authorized to use to achieve the mission principles. This is the how. How does our pastor lead? And our accountability principles, again, define the governing board's chair's standards, those boundaries, to uphold for enforcing the integrity and the fulfillment of the governing board's process. We're not letting these people loose. We are all accountability one another, and these boundaries that we've set out here tell us how we play the game. It's akin, I think, to those of us who were here for Pastor Terry's children's moment a couple weeks ago, where she was telling the kids to scratch their head and then was telling them they didn't do it right because she didn't tell them which hand to use. And without that type of instruction, without that type of process, the rules by which we operate, we can't evaluate our actions. I'm sorry, I forgot about the clicker. I just started talking. There you go. I didn't practice with the clicker, sorry. So just imagine that we have Disney's Circle of Life playing the music behind me. This is the cycle of accountability. It does flow constantly. So with the cycle of accountability, again, the board, let's start up here, the board creates, and revises the guiding principles. The lead pastor then interprets those guiding principles and imbues them to the staff. The staff applies the lead pastor's interpretation of those guiding principles. The lead pastor then holds the staff accountable for the application of those principles, good or not so good. Either way, there's an accountability process there. And the board then in turn holds the lead pastor accountable for the interpretation and application of those principles, and so on and so forth. What you don't see in this cycle, because there's no good way to fit it, is the vision team. As we explained, the vision team has the 30,000-foot view. I kind of like them to the heraldic angels that just kind of float around and tell us all where we're going. So, if we are to evaluate our activities, we need to agree on the standards of those evaluations. That's what I took from Terry's children's moment. Maybe I understood that better than my children. Maybe I should just, attend those from here on out. And again, the guiding principles that we've set out is the process from which those standards are composed, interpreted, applied, and used to direct our progress. I'm going to turn this over to Pastor Lisa because I don't have music to play this circle of life. Tom wants to say something. Go on.
At one point that I had written down, but I think it's important that you recognize that we are not reinventing the wheel. This has been in the Book of Discipline since the mid-90s, I think. And there are many congregations, because as we've gone down this road, we've tried to look for direction and help. And there are several congregations within the state of Indiana and others that are using this as the structure. So this is, while we'd like to think it's unique and something that we thought up, it's really something there's been work tried and true in other United Methodist congregations. So, Pastor Lisa.
And I would add to Tom's comments that growing United Methodist churches are using a model similar to this one. And it initiated with Ginghamsburg United Methodist Church just outside of Dayton, Ohio. And they have been a vibrant, mission-oriented congregation for decades now, one that grew from the early 70s from 80 people to about 4,500 people on a Sunday morning. So incredible growth in their community and also as a congregation, and this is the model they used to foster that sort of growth. Their pastor, who is wise and says this kind of with a little snark in his voice, but I think it's accurate. He reminds them constantly in the leadership that all people in our congregation are equally important to God. All of us are precious children of God. But not everyone is equally important to the mission and vision we're trying to reach. We are going to have to raise up certain leaders, just like Jesus had the 12 disciples, who will help us to carry out the mission and vision, while honoring that everyone's still created in the image of God and that in every single person. And what happens then because of that, because the leadership is concentrated in those 12 people, that leaves the other almost 4,500 to go out and be servants and to do that good work in the community. And so they have been able to transform other local churches and school systems, entire neighborhoods. They have invested in sports and YMCAs. They have a clothing ministry. They have a construction ministry that operates from a shed just outside of their church property. And all these things have been fostered by the fact that they have ample people to go out and to be inspired by the Holy Spirit to foster these ministries. So I want to talk about a few examples and to give you some concrete examples of how this sort of structure plays out in the life of a congregation, both day to day and then also when it comes to what I would say are big decisions. In terms of the day-to-day ministry, as Tom and Jessica explained to us, the vision that is cast by the vision team, they will choose an area of focus for a time period, probably a year at a time. And the vision team, in order to convey their vision, is going to create what's called a ministry action plan. Some of you were at the training on Saturday and got some experience with that, but a ministry action plan helps to outline our mission and vision, as well as our values and our context and our key strategy for living into what we believe is God's vision for us. And so the vision team is going to cast what's called a parent action plan that's going to guide the entire congregation, and I hope that it is rich enough that it can guide us for years to come. And after that vision is cast and they tell the governing board specifically where they would like the church to focus for a year, where they feel the Spirit moving us, then that will be conveyed to me and to all the other staff and lay leaders, in turn to create child plans, if you will, child action plans that are based upon this area of focus that the vision team is going to be casting. And what these plans will do is they will serve as tools for that accountability. In my last congregation, we checked in with these plans every quarter. We would have to figure out what rhythm feels good for us here. A monthly feels almost like too much, because sometimes it's hard to get a lot accomplished in just a month's time. We may in the beginning do every other month, but what we'll do is we'll check in with teams to see how they're doing on their action plans, and we'll notice patterns of where they're being fruitful, and we'll celebrate that and use those as models for other teams, patterns of where they're hitting bumps in the road and they're struggling and they need some more assistance, and that's where the governing board can come in and help to deploy some resources for that, as well as report back to the vision team and say, we're really struggling with this. Or in my last congregation at one point, the governing board said, you cast too broad of a vision for us, vision team. We need you to narrow down the focus. And so what I want you to hear is that there's a constant relationship going back and forth between governing board and vision team, between governing board and lead pastor, between lead pastor and staff and lay leaders who are out and about doing the work of ministry in the congregation. I want to give you an example of how this worked with a big decision in my last congregation. I want to give you a little comparison, and I shared this with some of you at Church Council in September. In my last congregation at College Avenue, we were a think about it church. I like to spend a lot of time thinking and thinking and thinking and analyzing and get out our red pens, and we were really, really slow to act. And one of the tasks that was before us when we had a church council and hadn't yet moved to the governing board structure was to make a decision about a retractable screen in the sanctuary. And you can imagine we made a task force and we debated and we gave the information to the trustees, and we sent it back to the task force, and then we sent it back to the trustees, and it went back and forth for 2.5 years. You laugh, but this is church life, right? 2.5 years to make a decision about the retractables. I should say it was controversial because when the screen was down, it covered the cross. So it's controversial, right? So there was a lot going into what kind of screen. I mean, everybody came up with all these ideas. They thought we should become like Disney World and get dry ice and just project onto dry ice. But then that was bad for the organ pipes. You can just... You can imagine, the ideas get big and grandiose, but this is church life, this is real life. And so in the midst of this, we decided in 2016, 2017 to move to a governing board structure, and we did that in the winter of 2018. And we were able, through the course of 2018 and 2019, over a 9-month period, to make a massive decision to pursue relocation for a building we couldn't afford with the help of the governing board and vision team. A massive decision. Now that they're still working on that. They did not move yet. They still have all the discernment process to do of where to go. But we had the building had way outgrown us, and we couldn't afford the space anymore. And we were able to go on a journey of making that large of a decision as a church and have on board 80% of the people in a 9-month time period through the governing board and vision team structure. And let me tell you how that worked. It was a matter of the governing board and vision team working together to put together a task force of spiritual leaders who met all the standards for themselves, those who were supporting the church with their prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness, and were deeply spiritual. There was a combination of a couple people from the vision team, a couple from the governing board, and a couple from within the congregation that formed that team. There was an empowerment to go and get a matching grant for a consultant, which we did as well, which was a blessing of both the governing board and the vision team. And then we worked really, really hard with that consultant over that basically 7-month time period at that point with the consultant And because of the governing board, because of the high capacity leadership, the level of communication with the congregation, and the trust that was placed in those leaders, we were able to lead the congregation to make a really hard decision in what I feel was a relatively short period of time compared to a much more minor decision that took us 2.5 years. So what I'm saying is that I see this because it allows a congregation to really shore up its leadership and to stay focused on what's before us as a positive asset and as a way to be more nimble and to make decisions that are important. We didn't rush that decision, mind you. We did all the right pieces that a consultant had us on board with church meetings, multiple meetings, and listening sessions, and times for people to process the decision. We went through all the steps. We were able to do it and to be of one spiritual accord as we went forward because of a different type of structure and a different way of being organized. And it wasn't feeling like a ping pong ball being batted back and forth constantly with a decision, but we could all move forward together. So I want to also just say a couple more things before I tell you a little bit about how we're going to go forward from here. Some of you are saying, well, how will this affect me? And the answer to that is, it depends. For most of you, this will not have a deep impact on the work that you're doing. You will be empowered to keep doing the really good ministry that you're up to right now. What will happen is that when we have new ideas for ministry, we'll be able to pursue them much more quickly because, number one, those ideas will funnel up through staff people who will be empowered with certain budget amounts to just go forward and do them. Unless they exceed a budgeted amount, which is in your document, of $5,000, and you have to have multiple bids and that sort of thing, then those ideas can be blessed to go forward and be fruitful, as long as they align with our mission and vision at the time. So if someone comes up with something that's not in line with who we are, then obviously we won't bless that. But in other words, you don't have to have your new ministry rubber stamped by a staff member and then taken to church council and then see if there's enough budget for it and then come back to you. There's just not as many steps because those staff people will be charged with, here's what you have, go and make ministry. Here's the amount that you have for the year, go and make ministry. And so there's still accountability because they can't exceed that, and there's still accountability because they're going to be asked every quarter how they're doing on their action plans, but it will free many of us up to go and to do the ministry and to be out into the Bloomington community, shining the light of Christ in places that need it so much. And let me
just help me understand the way I'm looking at it. It's between the old structure and the new structure. The old structure had a church council of 90 members who made a decision, and the new structure has a governing board of 12 members who will make a decision. So in short, it would just be 12 members who make major decisions for the church, and they will confirm the decisions, versus 90-member church council. So it's basically just reducing the number of people in a church council being renamed a governing board. Am I right?
Yes and no. So let me try to, that's a really great clarification question that Rita asked. So I'm going to come up here to make sure that the live stream people see me. Okay, so Rita asked specifically about the size of the board and if it's just a shrinking of the board. And the answer is yes, it is a shrinking. Right now, well, in 2019, we had 91 people getting emails to church council and 29 that I counted who could actually cast a vote at church council. This year on church council, we have 14 to 15 people because we decided to sort of start moving in this direction and to look at the book of discipline and say who exactly has to be on church council in order to make it a legitimate board per book of discipline. So we have already started to shrink the governing board to its book of discipline recommendation. Ours had just continued to grow and grow. And so that part is right. It is a fewer number of people who will be making decisions. The part that is different is it's not just a smaller church council like we're operating under in 2020. It's a totally different model of doing the leadership that is that accountability structure so that those 12 people are getting a vision from the vision team. Right now, there's no vision coming to them unless they come up with one themselves. And then that is flowing down to me as lead pastor and then to pastoral staff and to our lay leadership. And we're all being held accountable to that one vision. So for instance, one area that we focused at College Avenue one year was on becoming more missional. Everything we did was to look beyond our walls. Another year it was to become more mentoring. We really wanted to be raising up new people in faith and new people in leadership, and that was the entire focus across all teams for a whole year. And there's more freedom in that because how we choose to do that is up to us, as long as we're within what Jessica talked about, the guardrails and the guidelines of what have been set for us fiscally, in terms of our values and our mission and our vision. But it's a different way of doing the ministry. It's allowing those voices to cast the vision and allowing everybody else to dream big about how they might help live into it. Does that make sense? So there's freedom, but there are also guidelines. So in some ways, how I experienced this as a pastor was, I had some freedom to do some things with some creative staffing and with the way we went about ministry that was exciting and new. But I also had to check in every single month with the governing board and report on my goals. And if I wasn't meeting a goal, the governing board said to me, why are you struggling with this particular goal? What help do you need? Are you trying to take on too much? Are you getting distracted with other things? You've said 3 months in a row now you've wanted to do this, and it hasn't happened. What's going on? And that's not happening in our current structure right now. You have a follow-up to that, Rita?
Who's the governing board accountable to? I mean, who keeps them in check?
So the governing board is kept in check by the guiding principles. So if you look through the document, there are stipulations on what the governing board can and cannot do that are within the guiding principles. So there's the mission principles that Jessica talked about, the boundary principles, and the accountability principles. And the boundary and accountability principles are going to be the key place where you're going to look and see what all those boundaries are for the governing board. And if the governing board chooses to amend these documents at any point in time, it requires a 2/3 vote of that governing board. This is not just something willy-nilly that can be tweaked. It has to have a 2/3 vote in order to be able to do that. Does that help you? There are guidelines for the board.
Right, the guidelines for the board can be changed by the board. So if there's some involved outside the governing board, you can keep the governing board in check. Because if the 12 people just decide to do whatever they want to do, it's just 12 people.
Right.
The church decides.
Right, so Rita's asking about with the governing board, if they can tweak their own boundary principles, who's accountable, who are they accountable for? Well, the beautiful thing is we are a connectional church. We are not a congregational church. So the governing board will always be held accountable by the Book of Discipline. They cannot do something that goes against the United Methodist Book of Discipline. We are a connectional church, and that is the document that guides who we are and what we do as a church. And if there were decisions, like where I could see this becoming challenging for, especially where United Methodism is right now, right, is if the governing board were to make a decision on behalf of our congregation about where we align with the United Methodist denomination. That would be a good example, right? And maybe these 12 people don't agree with the other 450 of us. And at that point, I would say, there's going to be a process in place that's in the Book of Discipline that's put in place by General Conference that will not allow a vote of a governing board or a church council to determine an entire congregation's future. That will be what's called a church conference vote, where everyone who's a member has an opportunity. And you have an opportunity every year at Charge Conference to voice your concerns about A, who's on the governing board, and B, the work that they're doing. Yes, Jessica.
Also for clarification, when the governing board is sitting as any other board other than staff parish, those meetings are completely open, okay? So it's not as if there's 12 people, 12 angry men sitting in a room making decisions and nobody knows what decisions they're making. That is not how this works. The only time those meetings are confidential is when it is about staff parish relations, and that's according to the book, and nominations, sorry. And that is according to the Book of Discipline, if I'm not mistaken.
These are excellent questions. Anything else that you want to ask? Yeah, Dave.
being a trustee, this is a procedural question that involves the foundation, and Jessica and Sue were there when we wrote the rules. But as an oversight, and this is a perfect example, we had a roof leak, trustees needed to fix the roof, and we did an application, the parish and the finance okayed that. That is the cross-check. If parish wants to do something, they do an application, finance, trustees approve it. What will be the overseeing procedure when the new structure is in place? Is it 12 people going, I approve this if you approve it? And that's just something that will need to be looked at.
So I'm going to attempt to answer that, but if I don't, Dave, we're going to jot this down if you don't feel like it's complete enough, and we can come back to it. So there is, I believe, I can't remember if it's a mission principle, or I think it's a boundary principle that's in your guiding principles document that talks about projects, expenses, ministries over $5,000 will have to have a where is it?
BP.
BP what?
1.3.2.
1.3.2, thank you, Jessica. BP, that's a boundary principle, 1.3.2. Thank you, ma'am. She's on it, see? This is why it's helpful to have a lot of attorneys.
But I'm talking actually about the rules from the foundation's rules.
Oh, the foundation's rules. So the foundation's rules are not going to change with this new structure. You will still have,
They have to function under the structure.
No,
they function separate from the section. Yes.
Let's get the
I know.
foundation chair talking here.
Hi, thank you for that question very much. Just by way of reminder, for those of you who don't know, the First United Methodist Church Bloomington Foundation, Inc., period, is actually an entirely separate 501c3. It is separate from this organization. It has its own set of bylaws. It has its own set of activities and assets that are separate from the operating budget of the church. As I think about this, from our perspective, we've done a lot in recent years to kind of bring some order to that and to make sure that the intentions for all gifts are properly documented. I really don't, as I think through this, I don't think any of the documentation we do for the individual funds needs to change because that's relatively timeless. The process we have in place requires that any expenditures or disbursements from the foundation have consent from, let me think, senior pastor, finance, trustees, and mission if we're drawing from one of those two funds. I don't necessarily envision that changing. I think we need to change, we may need to change some of the titles.
The governing board has 4 different hats, and they basically were agreeing to sit. Now we are sitting as finance.
Right. So in other words, to your point, Dave, though, I think those controls are still going to be in place. And we just need to adjust the language if the governing board proposal passes. But, just in my role with the foundation, I would like to see those controls continue. And just by way of reminder, the foundation, it is never, ever, ever our job to decide this project is worthy, we'll give it money. That project is worthy. Well, we don't do that. What we do is ensure that funds from the foundation are expended in a way that's consistent with whatever donor intent was for that gift.
So it is in the book of discipline. It has been vetted, it has been utilized, it has been lived in for over 20 years by not just our congregation but others. So this is not some wild harebrained idea that Jessica Merkel came up with in her own, to consolidate meetings, because we all love meetings in the Methodist Church. It is something that the book of discipline, the thing that tells us how to invest our money wisely, what we can and cannot do, or what we should and should not do, like no tiki bars in the sanctuary, that has told us that this is permissible and how to do it.
And I will also say there are a lot of different variations of this out there. So if you went to another church, they might do it very differently. And as Tom was talking about, and Jessica too, with the specific leaders that are representing areas like nominations, staff parish trustees, finance on the team, they will have at their disposal an ad hoc team to work on their behalf. There are a lot of churches that don't do those little ad hoc teams, and in a church of our size, we can't possibly do all the work that needs to be done by one person representing trustees. There will still have to be teams doing the work. The same is true for staff parish. Like if there's a staff search going on, there will need to be other people who are helping to do that work. Now, those people will not wear the hat of staff parish final decision making. The governing board will do that, but we have to have teams of people helping. And my parents are at a larger church, and when they went to a governing board, they did not have these ad hoc teams at their disposal, and my dad was trustee chair, and he was just absolutely exhausted because he had nobody else. I mean, he had a building manager and people like that consulting with him, but he did not have that team of trustees and the wisdom around the table to still consult with. So that's why I really suggest keeping those teams, and they would meet on an as-needed basis to work on specific projects or issues that would come up in our life together. And likewise, finance is still going to have to, the treasurer, the finance chair, and the finance secretary, and others involved with finance are still going to have to touch base monthly or more at a church this size to do that work. And stewardship too is still going to have to connect regularly because that is always before us. So the workload is still going to be there. Some of the distribution and how we handle it will be different. Yes, Rob.
So this isn't really a structured question as much as it is a vision question. Fairly new to the church, I've got a heart for service, and we are coming up to a very historical event for the United Methodist Church. And from a media perspective, from a marketing perspective, there's an opportunity for this church to develop an impact. And so, you know, we're talking about it in March, right? I believe it is. When is the actual?
It's May. May.
Okay. So CNN, Fox News, every media in this country is going to be covering this, one way or the other. They will. And we need to maybe, look at finding ways to already have a plan in place, ready to launch as far as marketing and to reach out to the LGBT communities. Because if not, if we don't have a plan in place, by the time the media starts covering this, we may lose out on a really strategic point in time. So I just want to know what that looked like.
So I should also clarify, that is actually what we're going to be working on with some of our meetings in February. So it's February 12th, and if you have questions, I'm going to let you know. Ellen is one of the co-leads of that, of the Reconciling Core team. She and David Storm would be, we don't have all the answers yet, but would be happy to listen to that and to talk to you more about that. But those are actually, so life is moving on with concentric circles, right? But this is a separate vote from anything that has to do with the overall denomination and in terms of a potential denominational split, which, by the way, has not happened yet. We don't know what that's going to look like. That's part of the work that's before the General Conference in May, and part of our journey in February and March. We'll be having conversations about we'll be having conversations on a lot of fronts, but one night we'll be looking at sharing our own stories. One night we'll be looking at scripture specifically. Another night we'll be looking more generally at human sexuality and the spectrum. And another night will be dedicated to General Conference 2020. So we want to keep everybody as informed as we can be, but the reality is we don't know now. We can tell you what potential proposals are, but I think you're wise in saying that we need to be thinking about what our response is going to be as a church, but that will be separate from the work and the vote of the governing board for the moment. But thank you for raising that, Ron. I'm going to jot a note down for the other team. Any other questions? I encourage you to take this home, study it. As you look at it, you might have even more questions or things that pop up for you that didn't tonight. If you do, please come and be part of one of those listening sessions coming up on next Sunday and Tuesday. If you cannot be at a listening session, feel free to send an email to one of the members of the governing board task force. You have their names in front of you on the sheet that is the schedule. At the bottom of that is the members of the task force. Feel free to send one of us an email because we want to make sure we get all of those comments recorded if for some reason you can't be here Sunday or Tuesday to share those. Okay, I'm going to close this tonight. What sheet or what? They are on a sheet that says this one, at the very bottom.
Oh,
Yep, at the very bottom of the tab. No problem. They're at the sheet at the top. What's it say at the top, Mary Jane?
Governing Board Transition Calendar.
Oh, Governing Board Transition Calendar. At the bottom of that page has the list of everybody who is on the team. The other thing I should let you know is that all of these documents within the next week are going to be posted in PDF form on our website with a big draft watermark behind them because we're still obviously working on them and getting feedback from you all. But we want to encourage members of the congregation who couldn't be here tonight to, one, watch, we posted on YouTube, this live stream video from tonight, and then two, to take a look at those documents themselves. And we are also going to be putting up on a wall, probably in the gathering place, a list of everyone we believe is a member. We think we have about 1,400 of those people. And we want you to double check the list to make sure that you're on there so that come March 1st, when it comes time to vote, that there aren't any surprises. So please, that'll be up hopefully in the next week or so for you to check. Yeah, Nick?
There's a book down there by your secretary has been using. I saw it.
Well, it says, what does it say? Like, check your name here? It's a yellow binder? Oh, hey, it's already out there. What do you know? Okay.
It's just not posted on the wall.
It's just not posted on the wall. Okay, thank you. So, thank you, Nick. If you go downstairs and you're checking out your year-end statement, you said it's a yellow binder?
It's a white binder.
It's white binder.
That same table.
White binder with a yellow sheet of paper on the front of it that is the list of everybody. See, people do things and it doesn't get back to me. So, in any case.
It needed to be done. So.
But it needs to be done, and it is done, so I'm thankful. Go check that special white and yellow book to make sure that you're in there. I'm sure most of you who are here tonight are, but just triple check because it would, we want to make sure we have our records correct too, and that we're not dealing with that day of. All right, so I'm going to invite us to take just a moment of silent reflection to consider all that we have learned and heard tonight and honor that. And then I'll close us with a word of prayer. We give you thanks, loving God, for the witness of this church, reflecting the light and love of Christ into this Bloomington community for more than 200 years. You have walked with us through seasons of change and transition in leadership and leadership structures before, and we know that your Spirit is guiding us now. So keep us open, keep us listening, help us to make the changes and tweaks we need to along the way. Help us to hear voices and perspectives, and to trust that you have beautiful things in store for us. I ask that you would continue to bless those who are here tonight. I thank you for the many ways that they serve and lead and give and teach and learn. And ask that you would continue to help us to grow in love for you and one another, and for your children, not just here in Bloomington, but around the world. We thank you for this time and ask that we would go in peace in Jesus' name.